Today's guest is Mr. Ohan, who's in the hospitality business. He's been here for 21 years. He owns Freedom Pizza as part of KRUSH Brands. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I was going to say welcome, but we've been talking for the last half an hour anyway. So.
I think Ted's been stealthily recording us. And that was a really weird introduction from where we were. Like that was super formal. I hope somebody out there enjoyed it.
Don't worry. Don't worry. So listen, you started off 21 years ago. Typically, I think you just said everyone wants to stay for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened?
I came out. So I had a bit of a. My father actually moved out here. He is in education, and he moved out here to.
So he was a teacher.
He was an administrator. So he came out as like sort of a director of the higher colleges system. And so he came out, and I'd come out to visit him. I hadn't seen him for a while. I came out to visit him for a couple of weeks, and I thought, this is pretty cool. It just there was nothing there, right? But I was kind of at that age where I didn't really have anything to tie me down. I had a great job in Toronto, and I had the partner that I worked for was he wanted to he told me I'm going to make you a partner, all that kind of stuff, he was a great guy, and he was going to and I all I had to give him was my time and my attitude because I kind of sucked at my job. So, but he wanted, but he gave me sort of this way forward. And I came out here and I just thought, this is kind of, I just thought it was really interesting. And in Canada, it's a great country, but I could see the rest of my life, and it would be a good life. Mm-hmm. But I could almost see the rest of my life, when I was 23 or 23 years old or something like that. And I just thought, and when I came here, I just thought like this is kind of the chance to try something, right? It wasn't such a big move. My father was here, so it wasn't. So I was working with KPMG in Toronto, and I arranged the transfer over a period of time, and just came out here.
Okay.
And then sort of to your point. I really didn't have any, I had this. I traveled for a Canadian. I traveled more than probably the average Canadian as a child, and so I just kind of I felt really comfortable being somewhere else, and it just seemed like the right. And it's really funny. I remember I sold. I had a great life. I will say I was at my financial best when I was like 21 years old. I had my own apartment. It was very small, but I had my own apartment. Yeah. I had a sports car, and I had all the spending money I wanted because I didn't need anything else. And I thought, I made it. This is all I got, and So when I left, I sold everything, and I remember sitting in my apartment, and there was no furniture left, and I remember just feeling like this is. I felt totally free.
Right.
I remember thinking like I should feel, worried or scared, but I remember that I just felt totally free, and so when I came, I kind of came just mentally and physically
with
free.
A bag?
Yeah, literally with a bag.
Yeah.
I had a suitcase, and I sold everything, and I feel like I want to do that again one day. Just sell everything, and just sort of because I just never it sort of lifts everything off your It was such a good. Weird feeling, but it was surprisingly positive. It wasn't a negative feeling.
And did you find when you came here, because I came from New Zealand around the same time, and it was a bit like from here to here.
Oh yeah.
Was it the same for you?
Yeah, it was. There was nothing back then. There was everything we see today. There was nothing here. It
was sort of Shakeside Road, wasn't it?
At best, there was the Crown Plaza. There was a few. There was a few small buildings which I guess were seen as high rises back then, and the World Trade Center. But everything was new, and the price of oil had just gone through the floor. I think as soon as I got here, it went down to like $11 a barrel, and everybody's freaking out. I'm like, I just got here, what's going on? I remember nobody was getting paid by the government contracts and everything. But it was it was such a small. You remember it was such a small place.
Well, it was a 2-lane road to Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. With the speed bumps. And, you hit them 100 kilometers an hour.
It was like a journey to go to Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi used to have these speed bumps, and the problem is if you weren't paying attention, and it's a pretty boring drive, so you kind of nod off, or you're not paying attention, and if you don't slow down, you're doing 100 kilometers an hour, and there's a speed bump on the highway, right?
It's going to do some work.
There's nothing that'll eviscerate your suspension like hitting a speed bump at 100 kilometers an hour.
And then it changed.
It's been crazy.
So what about 2002, 2003, then it just went bang.
Yeah, there was a couple of, when I first got, the first few years were quite slow, but it was still, it was good because for me I was just getting used to everything, sort of feeling my way out, and and there's sort of have a work friends, sort of, right, and then and you sort of end up hanging out with the people that you normally wouldn't hang out with just because there's nobody else.
Yeah.
By default, you mean?
Well, it kind of was like that. Like you kind of like you can stay home and be a hermit, or you can hang out with people that you don't like. I mean,
exactly.
and so that's what we did, and you ended up, but there's like four. There was a place you went every night in Dubai back then. There was 5 places, and you had to go to one of them every night.
And generally, you'd be going down to Dira or
there was what was that bar in Dubai, the one where all the military guys used to hang out.
There was the Intercon used to go, and the
Meridian was going back.
Pancho Villas.
Yeah, Pancho Villas. Yeah, the little midget.
Yeah.
I mean, where is that legal?
Yeah.
Where is that even acceptable today?
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember? So the Intercon, they used to have the tall guy.
Yeah.
So they used to hire basically like people that were just weird, right? Or different. I mean, I shouldn't say weird.
Yeah.
And I mean, but they used to intentionally hire people that were just like a novelty. So they had that super tall guy.
The tall guy.
And then they had the midget with the chapeau. At the
and they still have them. They still have them in various places. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do.
That can't be socially acceptable.
Well, it's not, but they still do. I saw him just recently in a bar. Obviously, it took a while.
Was he drinking or was he working there?
He was working.
Now he runs it. Now he runs the place.
I don't think so.
He was bossing the front.
Yeah, but they used to. I remember that all the doormen used to be like there was just like
quite unique.
Yeah, something.
But the tall guy was
big,
and he was the tallest man in the world.
Well, he was and they made him like a special uniform.
But hasn't that not become quite a thing in all of the hotels, especially when you come in and you drop your car off or something? They always have a very, very uniquely tall guy.
But this guy was a giant. This guy was like this guy, and the midget at Pancho Villas. I mean, he was like the bouncer, and he would stand there, and it's like, dude, I mean, you're like 3 feet tall.
Yeah, and there was one.
But he could determine whether or not you came in, so that was a problem. Right? So he had power.
Yeah. So that was what it was like, and then there was.
What's the one that it was in Dubai? Is it? It was Pancho Villas. Because that's where during the Gulf War, that's where all the military used to hang out and
margaritas and Mexican.
They used to actually CNN used to film in there, or is it CNN? They used to actually film in there a lot for like the news and things like that. Because there was a time when it was all full of military, like when they were all flowing through here. It was just all American military.
Well, there was also the Marriott had I think it was Bamboo Lagoon. And that was when the brunches started.
Oh, I never did. I think I did the brunch once, and that was it. I mean, I'm not a brunch guy. I just never adopted the brunch. I mean, that was one thing I never did. I mean, everyone did it. I mean,
but just knocks your whole week out.
What I found was I ended up partying so hard during the week. That
you weren't even fit for brunch.
When the weekend came on, I was just like, I just want to sleep by the pool, and like, because I got into that cycle of like, Sunday is this, Monday is this, and then by the time the weekend came around, I was just exhausted. I mean, I was like, show up to work wearing the same suit, and like, I was in that kind of cycle.
Well, when you came here, I went to Saudi.
Ooh,
so we would come over here for the odd weekend, and
that must have been something at the time. I remember going to Saudi on business, and I remember I was working on this project in the Nasir province in the south.
Okay.
Have you ever been down there?
No.
Abha and all that. It's crazy. It's like it's kind of like.
Oh no, I've been to Kamis.
Kamis Masjid and all. Yeah. So it's like there's like cable cars and mountains and monkeys and it's a crazy place.
Monkeys and midgets.
No, there weren't any midgets, but there were monkeys. There was cable cars and there was snow.
And there was Yemen was obviously just
over
the road.
I mean, when you look at the statistics of that place, it's like sort of like dwellings, mud huts, and like sort of like. But I remember being there before they had internet.
Yeah.
And it felt like you were in some sort of like Monty Python-esque kind of like it was literally like I just remember that feeling of just kind of like you just went through this glove.
Yeah,
and you're on this other side.
Through a portal.
You're in this portal, and it was just like literally this is a bunch of people that have never seen. You were in their world, and it was so closed off.
Yeah.
So and this was like they were just getting internet, like satellite internet in the compounds. But I just remember thinking, this is crazy. Like this is like a bubble in the world that it's 25 million people that at the time, or I guess, or whatever. that just don't have any idea what's going on outside of the country.
But even when I arrived in Saudi, there was really no internet of any perspective. My mother used to send me newspapers.
Because I think the internet is what changed Saudi. I mean, because once they start watching Dallas, they're like, well, shit, we like this stuff. I mean, I was like, no, once you get Dallas, I mean, it's like,
I think YouTube in its early days was the most widely, because they used to set up their own TV stations on YouTube.
Was YouTube in Saudi? Was it?
Yeah,
really?
no, that was, and I think my missus in about 2009, 10, something like that. She was switched into that whole thing, and they said that more people watched YouTube than they did on national TV.
It's come full circle because that's probably true now as well.
Yeah.
But there really wasn't much national TV, and we had sports channels that would.
There were no cinemas. There were there was literally no access to the world, right? I mean,
you had Sky News.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I remember in our compound it was going.
In your compound, but did the average Saudi have any? No. I remember thinking like when you're interacting with people, they're looking at you like, almost a little bit like, I mean, you're like a.
This is what they used to talk about, the difference between Riyadh and Jeddah. Because Jeddah was a port, and obviously people would be coming in. And they got to understand it. People in Riyadh, they didn't see people.
The people in the Sir province?
No one.
Nada. Zippo. I stayed in. I was there. I was there. I think I was there for a total of about 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, which was insane by myself, right? I mean, I was really fit because I was going to the gym like 4 times a day. And I remember on the weekends, because I was working for the government, so I had to go and they wanted me to stay there, right? So and it was really lonely. Like I stayed in it was a beautiful hotel, it was a Rosewood hotel.
Yeah.
But I think I was the only guest. Like it was eerie. Like I remember thinking how I felt really it felt really you curl up in the fetal position when you go to bed. And
Saudi could be a very luckily I worked for DHL, so we had a big compound where everybody was all in together.
No, I was in the
and all the people that were like you. We would sort of adopt them, so they would just turn up in our compound.
Where were you when I was? And then I one weekend, and then on the weekends I'd like go sightseeing, right? So I stayed in. I remember it was an intercontinental hotel that was once owned by a sheikh, and it was on an extremely high elevation. And I thought, I didn't know. I was just bored, right? So I'm like, I'll go up to this place and check it out. And so I went up there and I checked in. I was the only person in this. I mean, palatial place.
It must have been like something out of The Shining, practically.
It was worse than that because I couldn't breathe because it was so high, and this is probably why the guy sold it.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I couldn't sleep all night because it was at such a high elevation. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night, like gasping for air. I mean, I don't know how anyone could live up there.
Yeah.
But it was so. It was like The Shining. It was an entire compound. There's no doubt I was the only person there, and they had this staff. It was the weirdest.
Yeah, that would be weird.
Yeah, and the fact that I couldn't breathe, I was just like, and you just feel, so isolated from the world, right? Because you're not only you're in this place, but you're in a place that doesn't exist outside of their borders, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting on this high. It was the weirdest experience, and as a far, that was a long way from Canada, right? I was like, you're a long way from home, right?
I know, and you used to have those thoughts, didn't you? Saying, how far could I be from home?
Yeah. It felt. I remember actually, it was a bit emotionally at points, because when you're that alone and you're that isolated and that far away from everything else, it does get a little bit you get a little introspective.
Well, my one trip to Kamis Marché, and sorry, this is taking a little bit of time.
Kamis means, was it Friday, right? Thursday in Arabic, yeah.
Well done, Ted.
And Machete's Market is Thursday market, right? Yeah.
So the great thing about Kamis, it had a big British aerospace compound.
Yeah, I remember it goes on for, you drive by it for for 3 hours or something, yeah.
And they had a grass rugby pitch. Which generally we had to play in the sand.
Yeah.
So it was our bet. So you'd want to go to Kamis. Anyway, we went to Kamis. We played a fantastic tournament with all these different teams that were there, and then we had a big party. And I drank a little bit too much of the local beverages.
Right.
And I missed
the bathroom stills.
Yeah. So I missed the guys, right? And then I woke up and I had to take a rush taxi to the airport. I'm thinking, when's the next flight to Riyadh? I'm in Abaha. They just left. I said, okay. how long am I going to be here?
A week.
He said, we've got another one in 15 minutes.
Oh. Wow.
But don't miss that because the next one's in a week.
The next one's
Yeah, he
in
said,
March.
you are so
The next one's in March.
lucky. You're so lucky. So yeah, that was my one trip there. But yeah, no.
But you were on the inside. I was on the outside. I was like, it was such a unique experience. But it was that I don't think I've ever felt that isolated in the world ever. I mean,
no. And also, you didn't have a mobile phone.
No, that's right. Yeah,
so
no mobile phone, and I had, it was.
You had no mobile.
Yeah. I had a little bit of internet in the hotel, but it was useless. And but yeah, that was pretty. But it was also pretty neat. Like it was also like it was very different, right? I mean, it's pretty. I'm like thinking like who else gets to sleep in a palace?
That's pretty unique.
At whatever 45,000 feet or whatever it was.
So if we scroll back over from there to here, if we go to, let's say, 2008, 2009, when the world fell off the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
But I think you started pretty much the business.
So I sold my business, some people would argue too early.
Yeah.
But better a year early than a year late.
And what was that? Because this is pre
so
pizza business.
I ended up working with. It's a long story how I came into contact with these two folks. I became a junior partner in a consulting company, a hospitality investment and consulting company. And my two partners eventually became my partners were about 10 years older than I was. So it was a great opportunity to just kind of learn from them. In 2.5 years, we grew the business from sort of the three of us to about 45 people. I mean, you couldn't. I mean, 2004 to 2006 was
crazy.
It was every minute you weren't working, you were losing a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was work hard, play hard, and spend even harder because you can't buy anything because everybody wants everything, and the inflation was crazy. And we were getting offers, like crazy. It was really exciting. It was like, and then but it was all kind of like it was really a lot of wheeling, dealing. Everything was on the table for everything, right?
Yeah.
Everything was for sale in Dubai.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever see anything like that in my lifetime again, and I suspect probably most people will never see that in their lifetime. And that environment was just fire on fire on fire, right? I mean, the whole global economy was going, and it was just game on here. And so we ended up, we sold our company at the end of 2006 to Jones Lang LaSalle. They were a decent company, and that's a really funny story how they came to us. But we took the company from the 45 people to like 145 people. I set up a transactions group, and it was still game on. And then 2008, I remember I was sitting in a conference, and the guy on the panel who was sitting next to me was a Lehman Brothers guy.
All right. Did he start crying?
No, he didn't start crying. It was a little bit. He had his BlackBerry, which that was the thing that not everybody probably. He had his BlackBerry out, and he kept checking it out. And I looked over at him and I smiled, because he goes, everyone knew what was happening. I'm like, you're all right? He goes, yeah, I'm just seeing if I still have a job.
Yeah.
And then like a couple hours later, it's like, no. And so the bottom dropped down.
And then as soon as Lehman went down, everything went down here pretty much.
No, this was.
I think it pretty well happened.
Wow, a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So I came out in 2008, did some stuff.
You came into a great timing,
It was great. And then I flew back in February 2009 to take up the business properly, and Shakeside Road was empty.
Oh no!
I could not believe what it was like.
It's funny when I look back on it, I didn't register how bad it was. I mean, you kind of go through it, and you kind of like, I was really fortunate because we just sold the business, right?
Yeah.
But I remember it still shook me. It really shook me, and so I stayed with JLL to the end of 2009, and they're like, gonna lay all these guys off. So I actually said, listen, because I was on a big salary because, we sold, so I said, look, I'll take a year off. Like, I'll take a sabbatical. I mean, what the hell's gonna happen in a year, right? And they said, oh no, you gotta, downsize. I'm like, but, these guys just we spent a lot of money the last year. I mean,
and probably some have even just come out here, set up.
I set up a transactions team, and we did. The guys killed it, and they're like, "Oh, we got to downsize." And I'm like, "Well," and I said, "Well, I'll take a year off, leave the guys." I mean, they had a great year last year. I mean, it was you were pretty happy a month ago, right? with everybody. And they said, "No, we got to do that." And I said, and they wouldn't accept. So I just said, "Like, I said, why don't we?" I'll just go. And it was kind of, I had finished my earnouts and everything, and I was just kind of like, maybe it's time to make a break. So, and my daughter was born. I'd just been born. So that was the clean break, and that's how I got into pizza.
Right. Good timing.
Yeah.
And that worked out okay, right?
Yeah, well, it's still going on, but it's been pretty exciting. Yeah, so it's never boring here. So I started with a franchise from the.
So, but did you? Sorry to interrupt, but did you finished? There was so much going on, and then you went. Did you take a period?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, my daughter was just born, and what I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't. This is the first time I was sort of jobless without a plan, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And I kind of said to myself, listen, there was the world was a shit show at the time, and I kind of thought to myself, my daughter was just born. I'll spend some time with her. Yeah. But the one thing I knew. And it was really tempting to do was to go back and do what I was doing or do something in the corporate world. So the one thing I knew in my heart was that I don't want to go back and do that. Yeah. And it's super tempting because as soon as you leave, then of course the competitors call you and they say, they want to hire you and pay you more money. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, and my wife's like, why don't you go? Because I'm getting tired of seeing you around the house.
I'm going to see you in the house for too long, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, no, she kept saying, because I'm pretty I'm kind of one of these people, I'm all or nothing. Right. And so, when I work, I'm kind of all in, and then, but I can slow down really nice.
So what does nothing mean? What does nothing mean?
Nothing is like, really nothing. I mean, like I could, nothing is,
It's like right now.
Nothing is like having three things to do, and like I can stretch that into a month, right? I can plan my, what are you doing today? Well, I've got to go to the dentist on the 21st, so I can spend all my time planning to get there, right? So I can get really laid back, and so my wife got a bit worried that I was never going to go do anything, and she was getting tired of me in the house, so.
And what made you or drew you to pizza? I mean, it was through a franchise, right?
So this is kind of a weird thing. We went to Florida. My dad had a place in Daytona Beach, and we went there, and it's like a lot of people like you in that shirt and that cap. And we went there, and my daughter, we just went there just to kind of like, and so, and my dad wasn't there, but we just sort of went and hung out, and I'm one of these people that I get up like in the middle of the night, and like I'm not a good sleeper generally. And all through my work, I would get up at regularly at 2 a.m. and work till whatever and I'd go to bed at like 9 or 10, but I'd get up at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning all the time. And I remember I was in Florida and I was and I couldn't sleep one night, and so I got up and I actually I was sort of at a crossroads, and I kind of thought, like, what do I want to do, right? This is nice doing nothing, but but I kind of be serious about things. So I actually just took out a piece of paper in the middle of the night, and I just drew a line down the middle of it, and I drew another across, and I just said, and I really wish I had it.
Do you still have it? I was thinking.
I wish I had it.
Frame it.
I wrote on the left side. I wrote things I like about work, right? Things I don't like about work. And then I wrote on it things I like about life and things I don't like about in life, right? And I kind of went through it because I figured, like I said, whatever I do, I should do something. I think I've earned the privilege to maybe do something that I actually choose to do that actually suits what I want. Yeah. And I went through all the things, and what I realized, the conclusion. I don't know how I arrived at this, and maybe it was in retrospect wrong, but but what I arrived at was. I'm not a very sociable person in the sense that like I'm a natural introvert, so I can appear extroverted, but it takes so when I'm with people it drains me. No offense.
No offense. None taken. Anyway, it's time to go.
No, but I like to be around people on my terms, if you know what I mean. So I like the hospitality industry. I liked it because it was quite social. Yeah. But I was at work, right? So it was on my terms. So I enjoyed being with customers, and I enjoyed the people that I worked with. But I could do it on my terms, right? So I got my social fix, and then I could go home, right? So I remember thinking like that was one of the things that I kind of liked because it was a great way for me to get a social outlet without it being draining and on my own terms. And so that was one thing, and I sort of everything came back down to sort of hospitality. I came from a fine dining background, but I thought that's just really fucking expensive, right? And that's hard, it's there's a very high chance of failure, and it's really expensive. And then I kind of got to this idea that, and because of the business experience that I had, I like the idea of business being repeatable and something that can grow, that's scalable. Because if you open a restaurant, I mean, it's great, but you're going to work your balls off, and you might be really successful, but that's pretty much all you can do, to do well, right? It's hard to, open a bunch of really fine dining restaurants. Yeah. And so I like the idea of that. So I sort of arrived at this idea that I could be in hospitality, work with people on my own terms, and have a scalable business, and that sort of led to fast food, or sort of QSR, things like that. And I ended up, we skipped over this, but I ended up doing a hospitality degree after I dropped out of university.
Okay.
And that was kind of by default, and that's another, after I called my dad and dropped out, and he said, "What are you doing now?" And,
that was after the calculus.
That was calculus was first to go. Then.
Yeah.
I remember I sat in a class and the guy said, the first day he goes, look to the left of you, one of those things. Look to the right of you. One of you is not going to be there. I'm like, that's me. Yeah. Thank you for saving me all this time. Like, I'm out.
I thought that was the Top Gun movie.
Thank God you said so. I thought it was just me.
Anyway, I'm out here. I'm going to save somebody a lot of time.
I'm going to save a lot of time. And I think the second one is my computer. I was doing it's just funny because I could do all that stuff because I felt I had to, but it wasn't what I had to work really hard and I could do it. But the same thing, I walked into my final exam for which I hadn't been to. I spent in pub, most of the instead of going to class. And I walked into the exam. Everybody's there and they're all serious, and so I wrote my name on the paper. It was about 30 or 40 pages, like a 2-hour exam, and I sort of flipped through and.
This isn't for me.
It's like hieroglyphs, I'm like, and after 4 or 5 minutes, I just walked out, handed me my paper, and everybody's looking at me like, "Fuck, this guy's amazing!"
Rain Man.
He killed it.
See you later.
Yeah, and then I the only class I did keep was film, which I really enjoyed. And all we did, this is hilarious. All we did was watch old movies, which I actually got something out of this course, and then we would sit around and talk about them. About our feelings and stuff after, and so that was really good. And then, but that's when I started working in bars, restaurants, and all that kind of stuff. And then I called my dad, who was funding this whole, charade, and I was at a phone booth in the middle of winter, and I called him Collect too. Like, you imagine, I can imagine my son doing this one day, right? I mean, I called him fucking Collect to tell him that all the money he's been sending me, I've been spending in the bar, right? I dropped out of school a year ago, basically, and I still had one course, but it was film, film, yeah. And so I remember I told him, and my girlfriend at the time was with me, and I was really kind of nervous. I mean, as you might be for, And I remember, I kind of sort of told him, and I kind of sort of flinched a little bit, and he was nothing. He didn't say anything. And then which is really not like my father. And then he said, "What are you going to do now?" And then I said, "I'm going to cycle through Europe." And I was like,
and this is such and such?
No. I was, she was an emotional support person at that point. And then I said, and then didn't say anything. And he said, "What are you going to do after that?" And I said, "I don't know." And that's why, and he just said, "Okay." Thank you, because he knew I was unhappy and stuff like that. But you just but it was, and the decision was really, what the decision went through my mind, because I ended up I had a choice. I had to declare a major in my second year, and I was literally looking at as I was in line, and I was just like, I can do phys ed, or economics, and I chose the wrong one. Neither one of them were great choices, but I chose economics, and I got serious and. And it was, and I did okay, but I joined the rowing team, which was great. That was a great experience, and I just thought, this is some bullshit. I mean, this is. So the decision process was the only thing worse than not graduating with a degree in economics is graduating with a degree. Because what the fuck am I going to do with a degree in economics?
Exactly.
And I kind of looked at it as cutting, is like I'm saving myself a year and a half, And so that's what I cycled through Europe. My girlfriend invited herself, unfortunately, and on the trip with me, which wasn't part of the plan, but cycled through Europe and then came back to Toronto. And it was funny because I just kind of enrolled in this hospitality.
But
program.
How did you find that?
Which, the hospitality program? So the school was, I mean, like, to be honest, it was kind of Mickey Mouse compared to what I was doing, previously. But I actually liked what I ended up doing was working at a hotel, and I worked at the Four Seasons Hotel in Toronto, which I loved, loved.
Yeah.
And I was working 40 hours a week in the hotel while I was in school, and I basically became completely nocturnal.
Yeah. Right.
I'd typically wake up at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I'd always schedule all my classes in the afternoon, go to work, finish work at 1 or 2 in the morning, study, do it all again the next day. What I really, my real education was at the hotel, and I was just working all the time, all over the hotel, and the stuff you see there is just
unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's another episode.
That was a life education.
That's another episode.
That was an education. I mean, and this is a lot of really fucked up wealthy people.
Yeah.
And you actually get this weird glimpse into their lives because you're just some guy like picking up their luggage, driving a car, serving so you get this weird glimpse into their lives that people that know wouldn't know. And it's just like you realize how screwed up people are. How much money can really, how unhappy people with money can be.
So I love the story about you said that you wish that had that bit of paper that said the
I wish I had
pluses and minuses and everything. So having gone through that, you said that
I like to be in a business where I can be with people on my own terms. And I liked restaurant business, and I wanted something scalable, so I sort of went to sort of fast food. And it was really weird because I hadn't come across. And then it was probably a couple of months later that I actually heard about this company, Naked Pizza, in the U.S. I was the founders were being interviewed on Bloomberg on it was like Entrepreneur Week in New Orleans. And had it been 5 minutes later, I would have been asleep. Like I was literally, my head was on the pillow, and I was listening. I wasn't even watching. And I remember I heard what the guy was saying, and I thought it was really interesting. And he was talking about a company with purpose. They were the first to use social media. I know people today won't believe that it didn't always exist, but it in business.
And so, what did that mean then?
Nothing.
To use social media then?
Well, nobody was using social media.
But if they were the first to use it, what were they?
For business. They're using it for business.
Okay.
And then they had a healthy product, and their mission was to basically use fast food to promote health, right? And that was they were literally the first company to do that. There were 3 founders, and they're still very good friends of mine today. And they're all very, very interesting and entertaining people. And in fact, Robbie is one of them, and he's going to be here next week.
Right.
We see them, and it's funny because I listened to what they're saying, and I remember I looked up, I sort of figured out, I got the name right, and I went to sleep, and I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning like I do, and I wrote this long email to them. I looked them up, and they seemed pretty interesting. They just seemed pretty clever what they were doing. So I wrote this long email to them saying that they should come to the Middle East, and the header on it was I actually have this email because it's pretty funny because it said something. Because I get up, I do this a lot. Like I just write because sometimes you get a response, right?
Yeah.
If you don't ask.
What's that?
If you don't ask.
If you're not interested, then it's just literally you're just firing a shot in the dark.
So was it like a flow of consciousness from you?
Yeah. It was 100%. It's like when you wake up in the morning, like I can't believe I did that, right? And so
Jerry Maguire.
100%. Yeah, where you're embarrassed about what you did, right? Like I hope nobody. Right?
Yeah.
I think it was like, you guys should be in the Middle East. I'm like, pick me, please, or something like that. Like, it was something stupid like that. And I wrote this sort of thesis about why the Middle East is so amazing and why I'm incredible and I should be the guy that should do all this shit.
And they bought it.
They bought it. No, yeah. So they both of the 2 of the partners wrote to me independently because I guess they saw it independently, and they both wrote to me, and we ended up on a Skype call like a few hours later. And I just had this sort of natural, we just became we just kind of hit it up.
Yeah.
And they were sort of intrigued about how crazy I was and they had 1 store in New Orleans at the time, like a 500 square foot store. Wow. And it was funny because they kind of said, well, what do you want to do now? And I said, I don't know. So they said, well, look, we can come out and see you. And I said, but why don't you come out and see us? Right? And so I said, sure. And I sort of went. I was lucky. My parents-in-law were there, so and my daughter. So I kind of said to my wife, I said, I think this is pretty. And I just told her about it.
Yeah.
And my wife's one of these people where like she can tell me a lot of negative stuff, but every once in a while she's always like at a very important time. She's always just kind of like her gut's really good, and she just said go, and I'm like what? I could go. So I the next day I got on a flight to Houston. Did the direct 1,200-hour flight, and then rented a Harley Davidson and rode from Houston to New Orleans. Spent a week with them. Really liked what I thought was just a really clever idea. There was a lot of reality. Like one of the founders, his daughter had diabetes, and so there's a lot of real, and they had a real mission, and they were really clever guys. Like they were really smart guys. They were very open and bizarrely open and transparent. And we sort of hit it off, and I spent a week with them. And at the end of the week, I remember I was calling Jeff, who was one of the founders, and I said, "Oh, I was in the hotel." And he's like, "Oh, you're off tomorrow." So yeah, and he says, "Well, when are you going to be in the States again?" And I'd planned a motorbike trip a few weeks later. And I said, "I'll be back, like in 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm doing this." What are you doing? I said, "I'm just going from New York to LA on a motorbike." And there's this long pause, right? And I remember I was in bed, like when he called me, it was like 9:30. I got up at like 10, and I was like, I remember I was like, the little light was on in the room, and it was this long pause, and I'm like, do you want to come? Yes, we're coming. And it was so weird because all three of the partners had I think 2 of them had ridden like mopeds and shit when they were kids, so they all got their
own bike
license. No, they all got their motorbike licenses. And they met me sort of like sort of midway through, less than midway through, and we went across the states together and got to know each other, and it was great. Yeah.
How long did that take?
The whole trip took about 12, 13 days. So.
Well, they must have been reasonably invested if they came out halfway through America with you.
I think they're crazy. I think
turn around and say, "Thanks, but no, you didn't really make it."
There was a part of no, but it's funny. Like I think there was this sort of kindred spirit about like we're all a bit fucking crazy. I dig it.
Let's do it.
And you get to know people pretty well when you're on a bike trip. And it was pretty good. And so at the end of it, we hooked it all up, and we launched Naked Pizza here like 6 months later.
And what was that like? I mean, I remember when it came. You got a lot of good press.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, they did everything. I mean, this was their first, their second store opening in the world was there, and they had signed 450 locations. Like they blew up. Their investors, they had Mark Cuban as an investor. They had the Kraft family as an investor. I became an investor and technically still am in the company. That's another podcast. But yeah, so they and when they came out full force, and they put my mentor in the business. They moved. They lived in the marina store above our marina store for a year.
And it was. I mean, in America, it was Naked, NAKED, but they wouldn't let it to be.
So this I've got a photo of this, and I should give it to you. We can flash it up on the podcast. It was on the motorbike trip that I had 2 other friends that were with me that we were coming. We were going anyway, and it was one morning we were hungover to shit. It was in. We were in like New Mexico or something. I don't know where we were. And
Breaking Bad.
We were really hungover. We had a big night the night before, and we were all sitting around at breakfast. Because you got to get up and get on your bike. And the discussion kept coming back about it can't be naked in Dubai, right? Yeah. And one of my friends, Alan, he had a napkin, and he's a marketing kind of guy, and he was sitting with Robbie, and everyone was, it was one of those really quiet mornings, and he just wrote N_K_D, and that was it. And I actually have the photo of that. I don't have the napkin, but I have the photo of that that time, because Robbie, who's coming out next week, who's the brand guy, he just looked at it and just went, we'll work on that. So it was a good trip. And then I did other trips with him, and we became really good friends in the end. And what was nice is what I liked about it is business didn't have to be so confrontational, and you could actually the idea was, could I do business with people that I liked and choose who I want to do business with rather than
what you'd done previously.
Yeah, which is do whatever you have to do. Right?
Exactly.
So I enjoyed the whole ride. Yeah.
And it turned out to be a great show for you, and then it's kind of changed into food and pizza.
Yeah. There's a that was a nice segue you made there, but there's a lot in between. But yes.
Yeah.
But that's what we know it as, and a lot of people here that who've only lived here for the last 6 or 7 years wouldn't know it as.
So what happened was when so Naked still exists, sort of. It was sold, it passed on several times, and it was I want to be careful about what I say, but the owners we ended up not seeing eye to eye in a lot of things, and they were doing things that were so egregious that my lawyers, it was actually my lawyers. At some point they just said, Ian, sit down and have a coffee. We're terminating.
Okay.
Like it was almost like you need to do this, but we're gonna do it for you. Yeah, we're gonna and so we terminated that relationship. But interesting, and I don't even know if Ted knows this, but I remember it was around 8 or 9 at night, and what's remarkable when you terminate a long-term agreement, it's a 2-liner. Because I remember I'm like, that's it? It's like I don't know how much you can swear on this podcast, but
you can swear. We can swear.
So the lawyer, who's quite a proper British trained lawyer, he said, Ian, when you and actually was the senior partner, was a Scottish fellow, and he goes, Ian, when you tell somebody to go fuck themselves, you keep it short. And it was literally a one-liner. It was just like, and I wish I had a copy of that, because it was actually I do have a copy. It was ridiculous. Like it was like just terminating all of it, like just in a one line.
A divorce.
Yeah, just totally and he goes, there's no explanation required. You're doing it right, and then
it's like handing your notice in a work.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, how much? What else are you going to say to them? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we did that, and then but the person I called right after that was Robbie, who was one of the partners from Naked, who had all been pushed out of their own business. And I called Robbie, and he's like, they all knew it was all going to shit anyway. So Robbie said, he goes, I told him what happened. He's like, all right. And he said, what are you going to do now? And I said, I think I need a new brand. And God bless Robbie, he got on a plane, I think a day or two later, flew out here, stayed at my house for a couple of weeks. And, because it was really weird, because everyone kept saying, because we were so successful as NKD, right? And this is a really interesting lesson for me. And, sometimes you have to trust your gut. And as I get older, you kind of feel, you feel something for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
And even when you're younger, you don't trust it because you get all cerebral and you think, but as you get, but this was one of those times where, and everybody was like, oh, you're fucked. What are you going to do now? I mean, the brand and everything, right? But there's a part of me that kept saying, you know what, the brand is great, but people, it's what we do every day, right? We're still the same people.
Yeah.
We still act the same way, right? So it's kind of us that they just don't know it.
Yeah.
So they think this is what they love, right? They've attached their emotion to this, right? To a smiley face or whatever it is. And I thought, all I need to do is show them something else to attach their emotion to and convince them that it's real. Right, and I didn't underestimate the task at hand, but I kind of like I think how much is really changing, like in our business, right? To our customers. So I kind of had so I went through, like, Robbie had all kinds of like Robbie's he's the best brand kind of guy I've ever come across, and he so we came up with hundreds of different things, right? And at one point, I was sitting in my living room, and it was late, and Robbie he's a great, he's just one of these guys. He's just so deep, and we just talk until like you're exhausted. And you're like, just stop, please, And it was late. It was one of those nights, and it was kind of late, and we'd just been talking. And it's just so the conversation is just so fertile that you can't stop talking, and eventually you just get sick of talking, because it's just you're getting exhausted. And I was sort of at that point, and he said, "Look," he goes, we can come up with hundreds of brands. He said, but it should be something that's personal to you. Right. It has to be something real to you. We can come up with all kinds of clever stuff, and And he said, and we did. We had like bookloads of like ideas, right? Like we had it was like, and there were a lot of great names, and then if you ever want to start a pizza company, I can sell you 50 amazing concepts. But and he started talking to me about the things that were important to me, right? And the idea of freedom came up. And I sort of, having my daughter was just being born, and having sort of, for the first time in a while, being truly kind of free in a way, right? The shackles of day-to-day life sort of broken. I can see in my daughter, the children are unencumbered by life, right? By the shackles of life, and there's very few times as an adult where you actually feel truly free. right? And I think, and it was funny because it occurred to me and like for me being on a motorbike in the middle of the U.S., in some godforsaken town, it's actually zen for me. Like I do these trips and I go on my own because I get emotional and I go through these like really weird things. And then I feel right in the world, and I don't feel that way very often, as an adult. And I suspect it's similar for other people.
Yeah.
And the idea of freedom has just sort of kept coming back, and the idea of it's almost a reminder to try and to seek that out more as an adult. Because I see it in my kids, and even as my kids get older, you can see it starting to fade, right? And it just. And I really envy people that are truly, like, there are people that are truly, like, I don't give a fuck, right? I'm not bothered by it, it doesn't bother me. And they seem very centered in themselves, and society probably thinks of them as outcasts.
Yeah.
Right?
We had one last week.
I was going to say, we had one last week, and she talked about working with Sea Shepherd organisation. And she said these people live with a backpack, with nothing else.
That's
and they go from job to job, and then they'll have 3 months out in the ocean, protecting the ocean.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is they're waiting tables or they're working behind a bar, and that's amazing.
What's amazing about it is like it's anybody could probably do that.
Yeah.
That's actually what's amazing, but we won't do it. And so that was where freedom came from. So that was and that's sort of how.
Do you see?
Man was born free, but is everywhere in chains.
Do you see NKD and Freedom as two different brands?
Yeah.
Completely.
Well, no. So
because as a consumer from here, I sort of see NKD. They're now Freedom.
It's a continuum. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. So the one thing that Robbie taught me was that a brand isn't who you say you are; it's what people say about you, right? So I can't tell you what my brand is, So I always see these brands, especially here. They're like, we have great service. I'm like, well, I guess that's probably for us to say, right? Our food, our pizza's the best. I'm like. Maybe.
I'll be the judge of that.
Right. So you don't get the right to say those things, right? And if you're saying them, it's probably not true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we're the best. Really?
So to your point a little bit, like the ethos of it's still there. Who we are and the way we behave. NKD here was a lot of my making in the sense that
I can see
it was so when we the guys from Naked and my mentor Alex in the business, who was like a Domino's, he's an amazing guy, Domino's pizza guy. He was the one that taught me everything, how to run and everything. And he said he kept saying to me because you do some things. You said you do everything right, and he said, but then you do everything to a different level, right? Because I really enjoyed it. And so I think a lot of me was in there anyway, and so Naked was a great idea, right? Great concept, but I was in there too, right? And so yeah, I think that's why I wasn't that worried about the smiley face or the. I was worried about it because everyone was going, oh shit, when everybody's looking at it like you're fucked now, right? And I'm like, hey, you're going, I guess, but there was something in the back of me that was like, I don't think it's that bad, it sounds like everybody does, but because I think people get attached. I think people get attached to something that's a symbol, but it's not what makes you who you are. Like if you think about it, like McDonald's, right? A guy with a red nose and floppy feet. Can you imagine sitting around the table and going let's do a burger brand today, and hey, how about a guy with that looks like today would be basically akin to a child molester.
And
who would sit there and go, we're going to do an M, and that's But
and have you seen the original Ronald McDonald?
Yeah,
he's a pretty scary guy.
Yeah, it's like Mr. Rogers kind of stuff. Yeah, no, but the thing is that's what my point is that we attach ourselves to it, and we have a different feeling about McDonald's. Probably most of us, but it has nothing to do with that clown.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Lose the clown.
Yeah, lose the clown. Who thought that was a good idea? I think people attach themselves to things, but it's if you have a brand that if your brand doesn't matter, who cares, right? But if you have a brand that matters, then it's really it's the energy behind the brand that's important, right? And that if you have a real brand, that's coming through. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Then get a nice, get yourself a clown and and something shiny, right? I mean,
what I see is, when you talked about freedom, and it means so much personally to you. I keep hearing this word, and it's like it'll get overused very quickly. Authentic is the word.
It's that's
true,
what Robbie said. Robbie just said and it's funny when I still even get like sort of goosebumps when I talk about it, because it really it was at a time, and it was really profound at the time as well, having just left my previous job and all that. It was a very profound thing for me at the time, and because I was at a crossroads, and I was looking for what's going to make me happy and all those things. And my daughter, my first child was just born and all that, so it was kind of a very interesting time. And it's still like I get on a motorbike. Like I obviously haven't been able to do it for a while now, but like a week on a motorbike for me is you can keep all your therapy. I mean it's really I changed as a person over the course of 4 or 5 days. I changed, like I just wind right down, and I go through it's a bizarre, because I've done it so many times. I go through this bizarre I get there, get on my bike and just start we start riding. I'm usually jet lagged and everything. First day, just kind of, coping and all that. And the second day, I start to get emotional. And, I'm sitting with myself in my helmet, right? But I start to feel, it just starts to sort of bang. On the third day, I get really emotional when I'm riding. Like, it's really weird. It's almost like a release, right? And on the fourth or the fifth day, I'm calm waters, right? And I went with a friend of mine once, and he wanted to go on a motorbike trip, and shouldn't have been, but he was a good guy. So he wanted to meet me in somewhere, so we went, and I went through this sort of. He didn't realize it, but I was going through this sort of, and we got to L.A. And we were at a bar, and I was just sitting there, just totally, I'd hit that kind of nice place, right, which I don't get to that often. And he looked at me, and he's like, "Are you okay?" Like, he was really concerned. I'm like, "Dude, I'm real okay." I'm so okay. I can't even tell you right now.
And how often can you get?
I mean, with COVID, it's been a nightmare. But but we typically we'd spend the summers in California, and if I'm a good boy, I can get out for a bike trip. Sure.
That's cool.
But I just it's and that freedom, and that just feeling completely insignificant,
So freedom is freedom.
Yeah.
Do you know what? You could come back time and time again, but we're trying to keep it within a certain amount of time. But absolutely brilliant to have you on, Ian, and thanks again for using your place, and congratulations for upping the word fuck by about 5 or 10-fold, I think.
But we have we use it. We've used it before.
No, we have, but I mean, the multiple's gone up a lot, which is great.
Sorry, I was on good.
You don't have to
better behavior.
You don't have to apologise at all. It was great.
I'm sorry for that, but the next one I can just completely let myself go.
But thanks again. Thanks
for having it, and thanks for using our studio and for coming to talk to us.
It's been brilliant to talk to you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.